The night was at war with itself. Above the small village of Smiljan, then part of the Austrian Empire, the sky tore open again and again with violent flashes of lightning, while thunder rolled through the mountains like an ancient warning. The wind forced its way through the windows, creaking the simple wooden structures of the houses, as if trying to rip away any remaining sense of stability from the world. It was precisely at midnight on July 10, 1856, that a child was born in the heart of that storm. The midwife, shaken by the fury of the night, murmured that it was a bad omen. To be born under thunder, she said, meant a life marked by conflict. The mother, Georgina Juka Tesla, holding the newborn tightly in her arms, replied with quiet conviction, "No, he does not belong to the darkness. He is a child of light." Nikola Tesla grew up in a household where words, memory, and discipline were treated with near sacred reverence. His father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, a man of strict intellect, capable of reciting entire books from memory, deeply convinced that his son's destiny should follow the path of religion and rhetoric. The home was austere, orderly, governed by clear rules and high expectations. Yet it was his mother, Georgina, who shaped the boy's essence. Though she had no formal education, she possessed a rare practical intelligence. She designed household tools, adapted common objects to solve everyday problems, built simple mechanisms with an almost instinctive ingenuity. Tesla would later state without hesitation that everything creative within him came from her. From an early age, Nikola demonstrated something beyond mere precocious intelligence. He did not simply learn quickly, he visualized. Entire machines formed in his mind with unsettling clarity. He could watch them rotate, disassemble them mentally, identify flaws, correct them, all without ever touching paper or tools. For him, imagination was not abstraction, it was vision. This gift, however, came at a heavy cost. At night, Tesla was haunted by intense experiences, flashes of light, sudden images, faces of people who were not there. Later in life, he would describe these episodes not as hallucinations, but as the result of a mind incapable of shutting itself off, a mind too open to the world. Tesla's childhood unfolded in constant tension between brilliance and unease. His memory was extraordinary. He read entire books and memorized them word for word. He learned multiple languages while still young, moved effortlessly through mathematics, physics, and mechanics, often leaving his teachers unsettled by the speed and precision of his answers. And yet, he never truly felt integrated. There was within him a persistent sense of displacement, as though he were always several steps ahead, not by arrogance, but by nature. The conflict with his father intensified as Nikola grew older. Milutin insisted that his son must enter the priesthood, believing that such an exceptional intellect should serve words, morality, and faith. Nikola, however, felt drawn to invisible forces, to hidden mechanisms of reality, to something that could not be explained by discourse alone. He dreamed of mastering electricity, a force still poorly understood, almost mystical to most people of the 19th century. This family standoff remained unresolved until fate intervened with brutal force. At 17, Tesla was struck by a severe illness during a cholera epidemic that swept through the region. For months, he hovered between life and death. His weakened, fevered body seemed incapable of sustaining the intensity of his mind. In a moment of clarity, believing himself near the end, he made a plea to his father. If he were allowed to study engineering, he would survive. Milutin, desperate, agreed. Against all expectations, Tesla recovered. For him, that promise was not merely a family agreement, it was confirmation that his life carried a greater purpose. In 1875, Tesla enrolled at the Polytechnic School in Graz. There, his genius did not simply emerge, it collided with the system. He worked obsessively, studied up to 18 hours a day, slept little, ate poorly. He corrected professors during lectures, solved problems other students couldn't even comprehend, and frequently proposed ideas that appeared absurd to the science of the time. Many admired him, others feared him. To some faculty members, he was not merely brilliant, he was uncontrollable. It was in Graz that Tesla first encountered electrical machines in depth, and, more importantly, their limitations. Direct current, defended as the unquestionable standard, appeared to him inefficient, restrictive, almost primitive. In his mind, an alternative began to take shape, a current that did not flow in one direction, but oscillated, allowing energy to be transmitted over long distances with minimal loss. Alternating current. For Tesla, this was not a hypothesis, it was a certainty, visualized with absolute clarity. But when he attempted to share this vision, he was met with disbelief and even ridicule. The weight of that rejection, combined with physical and mental exhaustion, began to take its toll. Tesla collapsed. His health deteriorated, his discipline fractured, and rumors began to circulate. Some claimed he had become unstable, that he gambled, that he had lost control. Whether truth or exaggeration, the result was the same. In silence, Tesla left Graz. There was no diploma, no farewell, only the disappearance of a prodigy that seemed too large for the environment that surrounded him. What followed was a period of wandering. Tesla moved across Europe, working minor jobs, struggling to stay afloat while his mind remained fixed on ideas no one seemed willing to hear. This period was marked by loneliness, frustration, and a persistent sense of failure. Shame reached his family. His father's wounded pride seemed irreparable, until death drew them together once more. When Milutin Tesla fell gravely ill, Nikola returned home. In his final moments, the father did something unexpected. He blessed the path he had once rejected. He encouraged his son to pursue engineering, to abandon neither his vocation nor his vision. For Tesla, it was a moment of closure. The approval he had sought throughout his youth finally arrived, late but decisive. With renewed determination, Tesla attempted to begin again. He enrolled at the Polytechnic School in Prague, but bureaucracy and the lack of formal documentation from Graz prevented him from advancing. Once more, the system had no place for someone like him. Still, fate held another decisive moment in reserve. In Budapest, while working for a telephone company, Tesla was walking in a park one afternoon with a friend when he suddenly stopped. The world around him vanished. In his mind, the alternating current motor appeared whole, complete, functioning perfectly. He knelt and drew in the dirt with a stick, explaining the rotating magnetic field in a state of quiet ecstasy. To any passerby, it would have looked like madness. To Tesla, it was definitive confirmation that he was right. But Budapest was not the place for a revolution. Perhaps Europe itself was not. To transform his vision into reality, Tesla would need to go where industrial power was concentrated, where electricity ceased to be a scientific curiosity and became an economic force. He would need to go to America. When he boarded the ship bound for New York, Tesla carried little money, a handful of notes, and an unshakable conviction. The world was about to change, even if it did not know it. And so, quietly, the first phase of his life came to an end, not with triumph, but with expectation, not with recognition, but with promise. The storm that had followed him since birth was far from over.
It was merely changing direction.
When Nikola Tesla stepped onto the docks of New York in June of 1884, he carried little more than a worn suitcase, a handful of notes, and a letter of recommendation. The city that rose before him was everything Europe had not been: loud, chaotic, impatient, filled with smoke, steel, and ambition. Skyscrapers were still in their infancy, yet they already imposed themselves as symbols of a new world, a world that did not ask permission to exist. The streets pulsed with horse-drawn carriages, laborers, merchants, and engineers. Electricity was beginning to move beyond scientific curiosity and transform into economic force. For Tesla, this was not merely a place. It was the nervous system of the future. The letter he carried was brief, yet powerful. Written by Charles Batchelor, Thomas Edison's closest associate in Europe, it stated simply that Edison knew two great men, himself and the young man now arriving. That was enough to open doors. Soon, Tesla stood before Thomas Alva Edison, the most famous electrical inventor in the world. Edison was unimpressed. He had seen countless ambitious engineers pass through his workshops. To him, Tesla was just another foreigner, thin, overly polite, overly confident. Even so, Edison recognized immediate utility. Tesla was put to work without delay, thrown into an exhausting environment where improvisation mattered more than theoretical elegance. Edison distrusted advanced mathematics. He believed in relentless trial and error, in brute persistence until something worked. Tesla, by contrast, sought conceptual perfection before execution. Still, his results were undeniable. He corrected faults in generators, improved distribution systems, and solved problems that had resisted solution for months. During this period, Edison made a promise. He told Tesla that if he could redesign and optimize his direct current systems, he would receive $50,000, an unimaginable fortune for a man who had arrived with only a few coins. Tesla took the promise literally. He worked obsessively, night after night, redesigning entire machines, increasing efficiency, reducing losses. When the work was complete and Tesla asked for his payment, Edison laughed. He said it was merely American humor, that Tesla did not yet understand how things worked in this country. That moment marked a definitive rupture. It was not only a financial betrayal. It was the realization that in this world, ideas alone were not enough. Ideals were not rewarded. Tesla resigned. He left with no money, no allies, and no protection. The man who had helped sustain the city's electrical infrastructure was suddenly alone. What followed was one of the harshest periods of his life. Tesla went hungry. He slept poorly. He worked digging ditches, installing underground cables for the very electrical network he had helped perfect. The hands that envisioned the future now gripped shovels. For many, that would have been the end. For Tesla, it was only a humiliating interval between two phases of something greater. Even in poverty, his mind never rested. At night, in cheap rented rooms, he continued to refine the alternating current motor in his thoughts. He knew he was right. He knew Edison was wrong, not because of ignorance, but because of convenience. Direct current required countless power stations, thick cables, continuous investment. Alternating current allowed efficient transmission over long distances. The problem was not technical, it was economic. Then, chance, or perhaps fate, intervened once again. Tesla met Alfred S. Brown, an executive at Western Union, and Charles Peck, an investor willing to listen to ideas others considered too risky. Unlike Edison, they listened. Tesla spoke for hours, describing rotating magnetic fields, motors without commutators, systems that functioned with almost organic smoothness. He presented no prototypes, only absolute conviction. It was enough. With financial backing secured, Tesla established a small laboratory. There, at last, vision became matter. The alternating current motor took physical form. When powered on, it worked exactly as he had seen years earlier in that park in Budapest. No excessive sparking, no unnecessary mechanical wear. Silent, efficient. It represented a complete break from the existing model. Tesla knew it would change everything, if someone powerful enough was willing to take the risk. That man was George Westinghouse. An experienced industrialist and trained engineer, Westinghouse was not merely a financier, he understood technology. When he encountered Tesla's system, he immediately grasped what Edison had refused to see. He purchased the patents, offered payment, and, most importantly, signed a royalty agreement that could have made Tesla one of the richest men in the world. From that moment on, the war was declared. Thomas Edison did not respond with technical arguments. He responded with fear. He launched an aggressive campaign against alternating current, branding it dangerous, unstable, lethal. He sponsored public demonstrations in which animals were electrocuted to support his claims. He influenced authorities to adopt alternating current for the first electric chair, a deliberate attempt to associate the system with death. Tesla watched with silent horror. To him, this was not science, it was propaganda. Meanwhile, Westinghouse faced lawsuits, political pressure, and mounting financial strain. The dispute ceased to be purely technological and became moral. On one side stood a centralized, profitable, restrictive model. On the other, a vision of efficiency and reach. Tesla, however, was never a man of public battles. He preferred demonstration to argument, and the perfect opportunity was approaching. The Chicago World's Fair of 1893 would be the largest event of the century. Millions of visitors, a global stage. The competition to illuminate the fair was fierce. General Electric, heir to Edison's empire, demanded an exorbitant sum. Westinghouse, using Tesla's system, submitted a far lower bid. He won. On opening night, hundreds of thousands of lights ignited simultaneously, bathing the city in a brilliance never before witnessed. There were no deaths, no chaos, only silence and astonishment. Tesla was there. He did not speak. He did not celebrate. He simply observed. He knew that in that moment the war was decided. The world had seen. But victory carried an invisible cost. Westinghouse, financially exhausted by the battle, stood near collapse. The royalty contract with Tesla had become an unbearable burden. And then, in one of the most debated acts in the history of science, Tesla did something few could understand. He tore up the contract. He relinquished an incalculable future fortune to save the system he believed essential to human progress. To him, money was secondary. What mattered was that the idea survived. That gesture sealed his fate. He won the world, he lost security. By the end of this phase of his life, Tesla had defeated Edison, altered the course of electrical history, and illuminated entire cities. Yet something restless lingered in the air. He had begun to look beyond wires, beyond power stations, beyond machines. Alternating current had been only a step. The true dream had not yet been attempted. And quietly, while the world celebrated the new electrical age, Tesla was already moving away from it, toward something few would be able to follow. Nikola Tesla's victory at the Chicago World's Fair was never celebrated as a personal triumph. There were no fiery speeches, no self-promotion. While journalists praised the grandeur of the electric illumination and industrialists celebrated future contracts, Tesla moved almost invisibly through the crowds, observing in silence what, to him, had always been inevitable. The world was finally seeing what he had seen years before. Alternating current was not merely viable, it was superior. And yet, that victory did not bring the peace many would have expected. The success in Chicago opened the door to an even greater challenge, one that, if it failed, could have rewritten the entire narrative of the War of the Currents. For decades, engineers and industrialists had dreamed of taming the colossal force of Niagara Falls. The idea of transforming that endless flow of water into electricity bordered on myth. Many had tried, all had failed. The challenge was not only generating power, it was transmitting it over long distances without catastrophic losses. And for many, that still seemed impossible. Tesla saw no impossibilities. He saw systems. When the Niagara project finally began to take shape, the choice of technology became a fierce debate: direct current or alternating current. Edison and his allies still attempted to exert influence, insisting that only traditional systems could be trusted. Tesla and Westinghouse argued the opposite. The final decision, when it came, was quiet and definitive. Alternating current would be used. The construction of the plant was monumental. Massive turbines had to operate with absolute precision. Generators needed to withstand forces never before tested at industrial scale. And most importantly, the electricity would have to travel dozens of kilometers to Buffalo, New York, something that had never been achieved continuously and reliably. Engineers doubted, investors hesitated, the press watched with skepticism. Tesla remained calm. In his mind, the plant was already running. Throughout the process, Tesla worked tirelessly alongside Westinghouse engineers. He adjusted designs, corrected flaws, anticipated failures before they occurred. His ability to visualize systems became a silent, nearly invisible tool, yet an essential one. He did not shout orders. He did not impose authority. He simply indicated, with almost unsettling precision, where something would fail, and he was almost always right. In November of 1896, the moment arrived. The system was activated. Power flowed from Niagara Falls to Buffalo. The city's lights came on. For the first time in history, a major city was powered by hydroelectric energy transmitted over long distances. There were no explosions, no collapse, only electricity, flowing steadily, continuously, silently. The world had changed once again. With Niagara, the War of the Currents was officially over. Edison made no public statements. His direct current systems quickly became obsolete for large-scale applications. Alternating currents spread across the United States, then across the world. Cities grew around this new infrastructure. Factories, transportation, communication, all came to depend on the model Tesla had conceived years earlier when he was still a student. And yet, something curious was happening behind the scenes. As Tesla's technology became the global standard, he himself began to drift away from the center of decision-making. The electrical industry moved forward, increasingly guided by financial interests, corporate consolidation, and political compromise. Tesla, who had never felt comfortable in such an environment, became a peripheral figure within the very revolution he had created. George Westinghouse, meanwhile, paid a heavy price for victory. The battle against Edison drained resources, strained alliances, and pushed his company to the edge of collapse. The royalty contract signed with Tesla, generous, almost idealistic, had become an unsustainable burden. Every new alternating current motor installed meant more money owed to Tesla. Paradoxically, the wider the technology spread, the greater the financial risk to the company sustaining it. And it was in this context that one of the most emblematic moments of Tesla's life occurred. Westinghouse, under immense pressure, approached the inventor and explained the situation. If the contract remained in place, the company would not survive. If the company failed, alternating current itself could be discredited, slowed, or absorbed by rivals less committed to its technical integrity. Tesla listened in silence. He asked for no guarantees. He did not renegotiate. He simply tore up the contract. He relinquished an income that over time could have made him one of the richest men in history. He did so without speeches, without dramatics. For him, the idea had to survive, even if the inventor was not rewarded. That gesture has been interpreted in many ways over the years. Some called it noble, others naive. Some saw altruism, others an unconscious disregard for his own survival. Perhaps it was all of these at once. What is certain is that in that moment, Tesla sealed his financial fate. He would never again possess the stability that could have secured his future projects. And yet, he did not appear to regret it. With alternating current firmly established, Tesla turned his attention to something even greater. To him, wires were a temporary limitation. Cables, towers, and transmission lines were provisional solutions, not the final destiny of electricity. The true revolution, he believed, lay in wireless transmission, free energy, traveling through the earth and the air, available anywhere on the planet, not as a commodity, but as a universal resource. During this period, Tesla began to distance himself from traditional industry. He worked increasingly alone, conducting experiments few fully understood. His lectures grew more visionary, his ideas more expansive. He spoke of Earth resonance, global standing waves, instantaneous communication between continents. To some, he was merely a few steps ahead. To others, he was drifting dangerously far from practical reality. It was also at this time that Tesla began cultivating his eccentric public image. He staged dramatic demonstrations, allowed electric currents to pass through his body, illuminated lamps without wires. He did not do this for entertainment, but to reveal possibilities. Still, many began to see him more as spectacle than engineer, a perception that slowly eroded his credibility with more conservative investors. The victory was complete, but the cost was becoming clear. Tesla had given the world a system that would sustain the coming century. In return, he lost control, influence, and security. History moved forward, but he was already walking in another direction, toward a territory even his closest allies would not follow. As cities lit up with the energy he had unleashed, Tesla was already thinking beyond visible electricity, toward something quieter, more invisible, perhaps more dangerous. His next phase of life would no longer be defined by public battles, but by isolation, boundless ambition, and a final wager that would determine how the world would remember him, not merely as the man who defeated Edison, but someone who dared to go too far. After the definitive victory of alternating current, the world moved forward as it always does, quickly, pragmatically, interested in results rather than the men behind them. Cities expanded, industries flourished, electricity became commonplace, almost banal. For most, the problem had been solved. For Nikola Tesla, it was only beginning. Tesla never believed that wires represented the final destiny of electricity. To him, cables, poles, and transmission lines were temporary solutions, acceptable improvisations only until something better could exist. From early on, he believed that the Earth itself could serve as a conductor, that energy and information could travel through invisible waves, crossing continents without physical infrastructure. This was not merely a matter of efficiency, it was an almost philosophical vision, energy as a universal good, accessible, free. Guided by this conviction, Tesla began to distance himself from traditional industry. While companies fought over contracts and markets, he immersed himself in increasingly solitary experiments. In Colorado Springs, he conducted extreme tests with massive coils, producing electrical discharges that resembled artificial lightning. He reported lighting lamps at a distance without wires, using the ground itself as part of the circuit. He spoke of global resonance, of standing waves that could envelop the entire planet. To him, these were not merely theories, they were engineering not yet understood. These experiments attracted attention, but they also provoked suspicion. Tesla began to sound less like the engineer who had defeated Edison and more like a visionary difficult to categorize. Still, someone listened. J.P. Morgan, the most powerful financier in America, saw potential in those ideas, not necessarily out of idealism, but control. If Tesla was correct, whoever controlled such a system would control global communication. With Morgan's funding, Tesla launched his most ambitious project, the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, an imposing structure crowned with a metallic dome designed to transmit energy and information wirelessly. Tesla believed this tower would be the first node in a planetary network, not only electricity, but voice, images, data, all traveling through the air. Decades before the internet, he described something disturbingly similar to it. But there was a fundamental problem. Tesla did not think in terms of profit. He spoke of free energy, universal access, a system that could not easily be measured, priced, or controlled. For Morgan, this was unacceptable. According to accounts, once he realized there would be no way to put a meter on Tesla's transmitted energy, funding ceased. Without money, Wardenclyffe stalled. It was never completed. Years later, the tower was dismantled and sold for scrap to pay debts. At the same time, another blow struck Tesla. Guglielmo Marconi, using patents derived directly or indirectly from Tesla's ideas, achieved successful radio transmissions and received public credit for the invention. History was written simply: Marconi, the practical inventor; Tesla, the eccentric who talked too much and delivered too little. Although Tesla later won legal recognition, public acknowledgement had already been lost. From that point on, his life entered a slow, silent, almost invisible decline. Tesla lived in hotels, constantly moving, constantly accumulating debt. He remained polite, reserved, eccentric. He developed obsessive habits, avoided physical contact, calculated each meal with mathematical precision. He fed pigeons in New York parks, spoke to them, claimed to find more understanding there than among men. One white pigeon in particular became the object of deep emotional attachment. To Tesla, it represented something pure, a presence that understood without demanding explanation. Even in isolation, his mind never stopped. He spoke of machines capable of predicting earthquakes, of interplanetary communication, of artificial intelligence, of energy extracted from the environment itself. Many of these ideas would be revisited decades later by other scientists, but at the time, Tesla was seen as a man who had gone too far, too fast. Among his most controversial ideas was the so-called death ray or teleforce. Tesla claimed to have developed a system of energized particles capable of disabling aircraft at long distances. He insisted it was not an offensive weapon, but a defensive one, something that would make war impossible. Governments listened, some showed interest, but Tesla never delivered complete plans. He trusted no one. He believed the world was not ready. As the Second World War advanced, his figure began to attract quiet attention once again. American authorities knew that, real or not, his ideas could not fall into enemy hands. When Tesla died on January 7, 1943, alone in his room at the Hotel New Yorker, government agents confiscated his documents almost immediately. His papers were examined, classified, archived. Some eventually reached Belgrade, where they are preserved in the museum that bears his name. Others remain shrouded in bureaucratic silence. Tesla died poor, alone, without public recognition. The man who illuminated the world left it without witnesses. And yet, his story did not end there. Decades later, as the century advanced, the world began to catch up to what Tesla had described. Wireless communication became ordinary. Computers connected continents. Satellites encircled the planet. Artificial intelligence ceased to be fiction. Clean energy became an urgent necessity. Slowly, Tesla transformed from forgotten eccentric into someone recognized as having seen the future with uncomfortable clarity. His name was recovered. It became symbol, myth, cultural reference. An electric car came to bear his surname, an ironic tribute in a world still far from the ideal he imagined. Perhaps that delayed recognition was inevitable. Tesla never belonged to his time. And perhaps that is the most accurate definition of his legacy. Nikola Tesla did not fail. He simply arrived too early. And the world, as always, took time to understand.